At my engagement party, my mum raised a glass to toast, then took back my $45,000 wedding fund and gave it to my sister. She slapped me in front of everyone for saying no. 10 minutes later, she was in handcuffs, and my entire family turned against me. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 30 years old. Willow Creek is a mid-sized city where I work as a graphic designer. Even though everything had been going smoothly, it seemed like the start of something much more significant. As I surveyed the dimly lit venue, I couldn't help but smile. Everything seemed ideal: the aroma of fresh flowers in the air, the elegant centerpieces, and the soft background music. We had an engagement party tonight, and James and I were finally moving forward after 4 years of dating. We would get married in 4 months. As tall and warm as ever, James stood next to me, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. He joined the marketing agency where I worked in the creative department 4 years ago, which is when I first met him. After we clicked during a company off-site retreat, everything just fell into place. He was intelligent, trustworthy, and kind. We had built a life based on mutual respect, trust, and shared goals. Tonight, we celebrated our engagement with our closest friends and family. As I looked across the room, I saw many familiar faces grinning back at me. James's parents, old college friends, co-workers, and even some cousins I hadn't seen in a long time. Naturally, my own family was present, or most of them were. At a table close to the front sat my parents, Robert Carter and Linda Carter. Their smiles appeared forced and rigid. My younger sister, Sophie, was also there, idly browsing her phone as if she had been forced to attend. Given her history, this was likely her 3rd phone this year. We were never particularly close, and the gap only widened over time. I ignored the uncomfortable tension, though. We weren't talking about past family dynamics tonight. It was about commitment, love, and the next phase of life, or so I believed. Linda stood up and gently tapped her wine glass with a spoon. Conversation ceased as everyone's attention turned to her. The sound reverberated throughout the room. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "Can I have everyone's attention, please? First, I want to say congratulations to my beautiful daughter, Emily, and her wonderful fiancé, James. I hope your marriage is full of love, joy, and happiness." There was a round of raised glasses and polite applause. I grinned and thanked James for squeezing my hand beneath the table. However, my mother's voice became abruptly colder and more purposeful when she spoke again. "I also have an important announcement to make," she remarked as she set down her glass. "After talking it over with Robert, we've decided to give Emily's $45,000 wedding fund to Sophie instead." The room fell silent. Convinced I must have misheard her, I blinked. I looked around, expecting someone to laugh, and let out a small chuckle. "That's funny, Mum," I said, attempting to sound light-hearted, "but that money is mine. I'm not giving it away." Linda's smile vanished instantly, her lips pressed into a thin line, her face hardening. "This isn't a joke, Emily," she snapped. "Your sister is getting married a few months after you, and she needs the money more than you do." My face flushed with heat, and my stomach tightened. "What are you talking about? That's my money, Mum. You and Dad gave it to me. It's in my personal account." "Honey," she began in a tone of false calmness, "you're doing well, and so is James. Sophie and her fiancé are struggling, and she deserves a beautiful wedding too." My hands began to shake. Trying to steady myself, I stood up. "We've already planned our wedding with that money. We've been careful. We're being smart with it. We even want to use part of it for a down payment on a home. You can't just take it away." Sophie nearly knocked over her drink as she abruptly pushed her chair back and leaped to her feet. "Emily, stop being so selfish," she yelled. "You could have offered to share it a long time ago. You know I need it more than you do." My jaw clenched as I turned to face her. "This isn't about need, Sophie. It's about what's right. I planned ahead. You blew through your own fund, and now you expect me to hand mine over." "She lives simply," my mother interjected. "She doesn't have much, and her fiancé is doing the best he can. You've always had more." Crossing my arms over my chest, I shot back. "I've always worked harder. I followed the rules. I saved. I planned. I don't care how you spin it, I'm not giving you my money." Linda's cheeks turned red. The room's tension reached an unbearable level. James tried to calm me by placing a gentle hand on my arm, but I refused to back down. Then, in what felt like an eternity, my mother stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the venue like a whip crack. My head jerked sideways. My eyes welled up instantly, and my cheek burned, not just from the pain, but from the shock. The room was utterly silent. No one moved. Even Sophie looked stunned. Slowly, I turned back to face my mother. In a steady, low voice, I said, "You don't get to hit me just because I said no." Someone at a nearby table gasped sharply. Then I heard a server at the bar speaking softly into a phone. "Yes, hello. I need to report an assault. It happened just now at Alden's Bistro." Within minutes, sirens approached the venue. The guests remained silent, some glancing at me, others staring awkwardly at their plates, unsure how to react. I stayed mute, processing the shock of what had just happened. Though my cheek stung, the emotional pain was far worse. My father quietly pulled Linda aside, attempting to calm her, while James stood beside me, his jaw clenched. Two uniformed officers entered the restaurant shortly after. One approached our table and asked if I had been attacked. With a slight nod, I confirmed what had happened. A nearby server stepped forward to describe the slap, explaining how Linda had struck me in front of the guests. Linda tried to justify herself, claiming it was just a family matter, but the officer calmly explained that public violence is illegal, regardless of relationships. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges. Despite my heart pounding, I spoke steadily. "Yes, I do." Right there in the restaurant, they arrested Linda. As the officers led her out in handcuffs, I saw Sophie staring at me in shock, as if I were the villain for defending myself. My father followed them silently. The guests were unsure whether to clap, cry, or leave, and the room remained frozen. James never let go of my hand throughout the ordeal. After consulting with my attorney, I formally filed a report and pursued criminal charges later that evening. The next day, Linda was released on bail, but the legal process had begun. We returned to court a few weeks later, this time for the assault rather than the money. Linda stood before the judge, who reviewed the restaurant's security footage and witness statements. The evidence was undeniable. She was found guilty of misdemeanor assault, fined $2,000, sentenced to 6 months of probation, and ordered to attend anger management classes. Fortunately, the judge gave her a 30-day suspended jail term instead of actual jail time. In the courtroom, she avoided eye contact with me. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood, looked directly into my mother's eyes, and said firmly, "I didn't expect this from my mother, but no one is above the law." I mistakenly thought things would calm down after the trial. Instead, the slap and arrest only deepened our family's divide. Linda cut off contact. Sophie blocked me on everything, and my father chose to stay silent. However, the real storm was yet to come. 3 weeks after the engagement party, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox, the kind that makes your stomach sink. It was from Holland Sutter Associates, a law firm. Inside was an official notice. My parents were suing me for the $45,000 fund, claiming I had misappropriated it and that it was intended solely for tuition costs. I initially laughed in disbelief. When I was 17, the money was placed in a custodial account, making it legally mine. I gained full control at 19. Sophie and I were told by our parents that we could use our funds however we wished after reaching adulthood. The only difference was that I had been cautious, practical, and goal-oriented. I used some of the money for my education at a public university, covered the rest with a scholarship, and let the account grow. I was always planning for the future. In contrast, Sophie attended an expensive private school, dropped out after 2.5 years, and used her remaining funds to start a boutique that failed after 7 months. She squandered her money on a launch party with hired influencers, an extravagant photo shoot, and branding. When it all collapsed, she was left with a fancy car she'd bought on a whim, thinking she'd succeed. Now that she'd lost her money, she and my parents wanted mine. I hired Amanda Holt, a sharp, composed, and confident lawyer. She reviewed my documents, then turned to me and said, "They don't have a case. The account was gifted to you with no restrictions on how you use it. Any mention of a verbal agreement won't hold up in court." I nodded, both relieved and frustrated. "Then why go through all this?" I asked. Amanda shrugged. "Because some people would rather drag you down than admit they made mistakes, especially when they're protecting someone else." Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just facing a legal battle, but a lifetime of imbalance, denial, and favoritism. My mother wasn't just trying to take my money, she was punishing me for Sophie's failures in an attempt to compensate for them. The following months were among the most draining of my life. The legal case consumed everything, my time, energy, and focus at work. There were preliminary hearings, emails, documents, and discovery demands. Walking into the courtroom and seeing my parents seated next to Sophie, all avoiding my gaze, was a constant reminder that this was more than a lawsuit, it was betrayal. During the hearings, Sophie wore smug expressions, clearly confident she'd somehow take the money I'd safeguarded for years. In one particularly heated session, she testified that the fund was always meant for college only. "Did you use all of your funds strictly for college expenses?" my lawyer asked bluntly, standing up. Sophie hesitated, mumbling, "Well, not all of it." Amanda nodded. "In fact, you dropped out of college and used the remaining amount for your own business venture and a luxury car, didn't you?" Sophie's face tightened. "That's not relevant," she said, "but it was highly relevant." Amanda continued, "So, if there were supposedly strict conditions on this money, why were you allowed to use it for non-educational purposes without objection?" Sophie had no response as the courtroom listened. I sat silently, my heart racing yet steady. My parents' favoritism, Sophie's recklessness, and their attempt to cover her failures by punishing me were all coming to light. Outside the courtroom, James remained my anchor. He attended every hearing, supported me through every challenge, and never stopped reminding me to stand my ground. But it wasn't easy. The legal bills and emotional toll felt like they were stealing the joy of our wedding planning. We had to postpone parts of our preparations. I barely slept. Sometimes I cried in the middle of the night. Other times I cried between work meetings. Yet I never gave up. I realized this fight wasn't just about money, it was about holding my family accountable, about being seen, and about being valued. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my cousin Laura called me while I was at home reviewing a list of wedding vendors. "Emily, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about the wedding being cancelled," she said sympathetically. My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? The wedding's still on." There was a pause. "Your mum called me last week. She said you and James broke up because he cheated on you." My jaw dropped. In the hour that followed, I received 3 more calls from confused friends and distant relatives asking why the wedding was cancelled. Some had even received fake emails, supposedly from me, claiming the event was off. When I checked my email, nothing was in my sent folder, indicating someone had created a fake account to impersonate me. I was stunned. My first thought was Sophie, the pattern was clear, but I had no proof. The lawsuit was just the beginning. The sabotage had turned personal. I called my mum's sister, Aunt Ellen, one of the few family members who hadn't taken sides. "I was about to call you," she sighed. "Your mother's been telling people you're lying about James, that you're unstable, and that the wedding was never supposed to happen." Exhausted, I leaned against the wall. "Why is she doing this?" I asked. "Because she's protecting Sophie," Aunt Ellen replied gently. "She's always protected her, even when she didn't deserve it. I love Sophie, but your mom is enabling her, and now she's dragging you through the mud to make her look better." The betrayal cut deeper than any courtroom testimony. My own mother was trying to ruin my reputation to gain sympathy for my sister. When James came home that night, he saw my face and immediately asked, "What's wrong?" I told him what Laura had said and showed him screenshots of the fake emails. He wasn't surprised, but he was angry. "Your sister contacted me too," he said grimly. "She claimed she had proof you were cheating on me and sent photos." Horrified, I watched as he pulled out his phone and showed me several poorly edited, obviously manipulated images of a woman with my face superimposed on another body, standing next to an unknown man. It was deeply unsettling but also laughably bad. James shook his head. "Of course I didn't believe it, but your parents saw them too. Your family is trying to destroy everything we're building." At that point, we decided to take action. For the wedding, we hired a professional security company and provided photos of Linda, Robert, and Sophie with strict instructions that none of them be allowed entry. I hated that it had come to this, but I didn't want them to ruin anything else. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling a strange mix of dread and excitement. Just outside Willow Creek, James and I had chosen a stunning outdoor venue, elegant and intimate without being excessive. The green lawn was lined with white chairs facing a wooden arch draped in fresh flowers. As guests began to arrive, I stood in my dress in the bridal suite, adjusting my veil. Nerves tightened in my stomach. Not because of the vows, but because of what I knew was still possible. 2 trained security guards were stationed at the venue's entrance with strict orders to bar my immediate family from entering. I had reviewed every detail with James, but I still couldn't relax. At around 2:15, there was a knock on the bridal suite door. A guard entered, lowering his voice. "Miss Carter," he began carefully, "we've just detained a young woman trying to enter through the back service gate. She matches the photo you provided your sister, Sophie." My heart raced. "Was she alone?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, "but she was carrying a tote bag. When we opened it, we found a large can of red paint." My throat tightened with each breath. She intended to ruin the bridal gown, the venue, everything. Disbelief, sadness, and anger fought for space in my chest. The guard had asked, "Do you want to press charges? We can contact the local sheriff right now." I paused. I had every reason to call the police again after the slap, the lawsuit, the lies, the fake photos, and now this. But this was my wedding day. Their chaos had already cost me enough. "No," I said flatly. "Just make sure she's removed from the property and doesn't come back. Please also check that my parents haven't tried to sneak in." He nodded and left. I sank into a nearby chair, trying not to cry. My best friend, Hannah, knelt beside me. "What happened?" she whispered, my voice barely steady. I looked at her. Sophie tried to sneak in with a can of paint. She was going to ruin everything. Hannah's eyes widened in shock, then hardened with anger. "You know what that means," she said firmly. "You win. They couldn't stop your happiness, so they tried to destroy it. But you stopped them. You stood your ground. Now, go marry the man who stood by you through all of this. You deserve every bit of this day." I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and stood up. My dad's brother, Uncle David, walked me down the aisle. As I stepped into the garden, James stood waiting beneath the arch, his eyes locked on mine. In that moment, the rest of the world vanished. The pain, the tears, the court dates, the betrayal, all of it faded. Today was about love. The ceremony was beautiful and heartfelt. Our vows were filled with promises of partnership, strength, and loyalty. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the guests erupted in cheers. For the first time in months, I felt light-free. The reception surpassed our expectations in every way. Music, laughter, and heartfelt toasts from those who had supported us through it all filled the evening. Hannah's toast brought tears to my eyes, the kind that come only after weathering a storm and finding calm on the other side. James and I danced, laughed, and ate, and for once, nothing else mattered. Nearly everyone commented on how beautiful the venue looked, how happy we seemed, and how the day was filled with genuine love. Though a few guests had heard snippets of the drama, they respected our silence. During dinner, one aunt whispered, "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground." Her words lingered with me long after the cake was cut, and the final song played. As the night ended, James and I ran hand in hand through a shower of rice, tossed by our friends, hiding under a starry sky. We grinned like children as we climbed into the waiting car and drove away. I turned to glance back at the venue's distant glow. My sister had tried to destroy that moment and failed. They all had. Our honeymoon was magical, a quiet seaside town far from Willow Creek for 3 weeks. No courts, no conflicts, just the man I loved, the sun, and the waves. For the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath and felt ready to move forward. When we returned home, we focused on settling into our apartment, planning for the future, and leaving the past behind. A few weeks later, I ran into my cousin Sarah at the grocery store. After a quick hug, she asked, "Did you hear about Sophie's wedding?" I raised an eyebrow. "We're not exactly talking," I replied. "Your parents took out a loan to pay for everything," she said. "It's going to be at the Grand Garden Hotel downtown, super lavish. They're flying in a chef from out of state. It's a whole production." I couldn't help but chuckle quietly. They were clearly going all out for Sophie, even if it meant taking on debt. Sarah asked softly, "Are you going if she invites you?" "She tried to ruin my wedding with a can of paint," I said sharply. "So, no, I won't be attending." Oddly enough, no invitation ever came. Later, I heard through family gossip that several relatives declined invitations to Sophie's wedding because they were uncomfortable with how I'd been treated. Some were polite about it, others spoke out. Either way, the shine was starting to wear off for Sophie and my parents. The $45,000 was used exactly as James and I had planned, modest, purposeful, and surrounded by loved ones. Our wedding was everything we could have dreamed of. We also put the remaining funds toward a down payment on a lovely apartment outside the city. The mortgage was manageable with our combined incomes, and for the first time, we were building equity instead of spending everything on rent. Though small, our home was ours, built with patience and hard choices rather than handouts. After the wedding, my life found a rhythm I didn't know I needed. On weekends, James and I decorated our new apartment, nothing extravagant, just walls lined with photos from our wedding and travels, shelves we installed ourselves, and a couch we saved for. One Saturday afternoon, while we were assembling the guest room, James fumbled with an IKEA dresser and laughed. "Who do you think will be our first overnight guest?" he asked. I paused, holding a screwdriver, my mind briefly drifting to my parents. In some distant reality, they might apologize. Maybe Sophie would grow up and take responsibility for her actions. But I wasn't holding my breath. With a gentle smile, I said, "Whoever it is, it'll be someone who genuinely cares about us." The holidays passed without texts, calls, or invitations. Their absence stung at first. That year, my birthday came and went in silence, and for the first time, I didn't hear my mother's voice wishing me well. But then I remembered the slap, the lawsuit, the lies, the paint, the fake photos, and the jealousy-fueled attempt to ruin something pure. The pain gave way to clarity. Every so often, James would ask if I thought my family and I would ever reconcile. "Maybe one day," I said honestly. "But if it happens, it'll take more than an apology. It'll take change, and I don't see that coming anytime soon." In the end, Sophie's wedding came and went. I heard it was extravagant, with matching designer outfits for the bridesmaids, champagne fountains, and a hired string quartet. But several key family members chose not to attend, uneasy about how my parents and sister had treated me. Worse still, word spread that Robert and Linda had taken out a massive loan to make a statement and pretend the previous year hadn't happened. They poured everything into that one event, but it had, and people remembered. As James and I built our marriage, I came to a profound realization. Family isn't just about blood. It's the people who respect your peace, honor your boundaries, and celebrate your successes. Yes, I'd lost a lot, but I'd gained a home, a husband who stood by me through everything, friends and relatives who never wavered after seeing the truth, and, above all, myself. I didn't break. I didn't give in. I defended what I'd built out of integrity, not greed. The $45,000 gave us stability, a home, and a future. But in truth, it gave us freedom from manipulation, freedom from guilt, and freedom from a family that believed loyalty was a condition of love. I stood up for myself, and I won not just in court but in life.